So this is a bit of a guide on how to write your Criterion D in science, but this one in particular is focusing on biology. That's an O. Grade 10 and chronic illnesses. Chronic illness. So I'm going to select asthma as my chronic illness. So first thing I do is I go and do some research into what is asthma, what evidence is there that it exists, and that it is an issue. So I've done a bit of basic research on Google and found this website, webmd.com, that tells me a few statistics, and I can include that. So I'm gonna intro by explaining what is asthma, give some evidence that it's an issue, any diagrams that are relevant to it. I've noticed that when I Googled it, Mayo Clinic had a nice image and an explanation, so I'll include that, and then use WebMD as my evidence that there is a problem, because it says here that 25 million Americans are affected by it and 2 million emergency room visits per year. So I explain it. Then you go on, so that's part one. You explain the issue and give proof that the issue exists. And then like paragraph 2, or this might take up maybe 2 paragraphs. The second section then is where you look at a solution. So you would explain a solution to it. For asthma, it's the inhalers. So you go to treatment. You perhaps use a different website if you want, but you talk about the solutions. So you explain them, and I want you to focus on one in particular. Yeah, one solution, and explain it in detail. The solution, how it works, and stuff like that. Then you're going to evaluate. So this is DI, yeah? Then you're going to evaluate it. So you're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses. You can, if you want to, you can put them in a table of strengths and weaknesses and talk about them, that's fine, but you need to explain them in detail, yeah? You also need to link them to scientific factors. Such as economics, environment, and society and ethics and stuff like that. So you could say like, one of the weaknesses of using an inhaler as a solution is that you have to dispose of the canisters, and that has an environmental impact. Another issue surrounding the solution is that carrying an inhaler can sometimes have a stigma associated to it, and what people think about you as a result of it. You can talk about the economical cost. Maybe you can then also talk about on the state as well, as in like, what is the economical cost to government of that country in terms of the solution. But then you could also talk about, if you don't use an inhaler, the idea that might have a bigger economical cost, because that might then involve emergency treatment or larger surgeries or something like that. So you're going through your solution and you're critiquing it. Often the strengths are society related in terms of it solves a health issue. You then need to bring all that together in a conclusion. And for grade 10, it should be a weighted conclusion. So you should say, in summary, whilst there is a cost and whilst there is an environmental impact, the positives of solving this problem, blah, blah, blah. However, another solution doesn't have the environmental impact, so that could be an option. A weighted version is where you say things like, well, the societal positive of saving lives is worth 10 out of 10, whereas the environmental impact of the odd canister being disposed is 4 out of 10, yeah? And then the stigma is only 3 out of 10 or something like that. So the negatives total 7 out of 10, whereas the positives, you don't have to do it out of 10 to be honest, the positives total 10, and so the positives outweigh the negatives, and therefore this is a good solution. That is basically the crux of your essay. The remainder of your essay, strands 3 and 4, are related to... So strand 3 is your use of scientific terminology. So make sure that in your explanation, in your strand 1, that you explain your solution and use scientific terminology. Strand 4 is your citation and your referencing. Make sure that when you quote in strand 1 that there's 2 million emergency room cases per year, that you say who said that. So I think mine was like webmd.com. Yeah, that is known as in-text citation, and that needs to be done, otherwise it is plagiarism. And then at the end, you need a bibliography, and that should be in MLA format, which involves how you lay out your reference in terms of a web address followed by an access date and an author and such like, but then they're also in alphabetical order. That is the MLA format. What I would also recommend is a bit of an appendix, where if you have 1 or 2 websites or documents that you have used a lot, you might want to consider doing what we call an OPVL, or a real deal. There's lots of these where you evaluate the quality of the source. You consider bias, you consider some other things. I guess they are on the internet. I know that OPVL is OPVL as a way of evaluating it. But I think the one that I've seen used in this school is called the real deal source evaluation. Maybe that's not on the internet. That's not it. But that's basically where you talk about whether it's reliable, whether the information... Oh, it's here, look. Yeah. Finally evaluate credible sources online. So yeah, that's what you might want in your appendix. It doesn't have to be particularly long, doesn't have to be massively detailed, but you should reflect on whether it's a good website to use or not. Obviously, like WebMD is probably decent, but any .orgs you can find to explain it are probably pretty good. Mayoclinic.org, that probably is decent. But Wikipedia, obviously, potentially not the best source. Yeah. Things like this bottom one, it looks like it's some kind of hospital explaining it. And then you've got the CDC, the American something about diseases council. Can't remember what it is. Yeah, that should be your criteria D. I think it should take roughly 2 pages. I think this section, where you identify and explain the solutions, should be about 3/4 of a page, roughly. The evaluation bit should be about 3/4 of a page. and then this takes up no space whatsoever. Your citations should be less than half a page, really. You should only have like 3 to 5 sources anyway. And then your appendix should be no more than 1 page. We're not after a detailed one there.